a lovely non-sourdough sourdough bread. Hello, howdy, and welcome to another Sourdough Saturday. I'm Catherine, the Aerogarden homesteader. Today we are going to make sourdough style bread without sourdough. So this is for people who can't maintain a sourdough, have been unable to maintain a sourdough, or just don't feel like feeding it all the time. This is a Poolish. I made this using 200 grams of flour, 175 grams of water, and 2 pinches of yeast. So I used a 3-finger pinch and a 2-finger pinch to put the yeast in. And this has been going for about 16 hours, maybe 14 to 16 hours. And it has risen up and then started falling back a little bit. So this is where it started. This is what we will be using to make sourdough style bread. That will not be sour because it doesn't have any of the lactobacteria in it that will cause the sourness. So I'm going to get going on weighing out my ingredients. Weighing out the rest of my ingredients. This is actually using some of the flour and water from the recipe. So you can pretty much modify any recipe to use this type of method if you like it. So I am going to start with 350 grams of flour. Now I'm going to use my handy dandy mixer, but you can do this by hand. You would just kind of do it the same way as doing the pizza dough, where you would kind of mix it up to a shaggy mess and then just do your stretches and folds to build up your gluten. I'm going to, oops, that should have been 250. I'm going to take this part of the way to complete, but I'm not going to take it all the way. Well, I can't get my phone to turn on. There we go. Drawback to having a recipe on your phone is it's hard to turn on when you have wet or floury fingers. Okay, let's get this up to 350. Okay. Really? Oh, it's going to be one of those days. Yeah, get that in. Another ingredient I'm using, you do not have to use this. I do not keep bread flour in the house because I just don't go through it fast enough. So I actually keep this in the house. It's basically vital wheat gluten that makes all-purpose flour into bread flour. So if you have bread flour, just use that. I'm going to put in 45 grams, preferably without making a big mess. Yeah, close enough. If you don't have it and you don't want to use it and you don't have bread flour, all-purpose flour will work just fine. Just add 45 grams extra. Sorry, this bag is kind of a little crinkly. Okay. So get that in there. Okay. Okay, calls for 13 grams of salt. Probably better to use something a little finer than this salt I'm using, this kosher salt, but it's what I've got. Okay, and then finally I will need 275 grams of water. So this is it's tepid. It's been sitting around for a little bit. A little warmer than room temperature. That doesn't really matter. I need 275. There you go, 275. That can get dumped in. This can get turned off. We're done with this. And finally, depending on how well you feel your pinches of yeast did, you can add another pinch of yeast right now, which I'm going to do. I'm just going to do a 2-finger pinch. So it just adds a little bit more. This will kind of help speed things up a little, but it doesn't really matter. It's still going to take a good chunk of the day to get this fermented enough to rise. So I'm going to get this in, and I'm going to get this mixed. I really want to just mix this until it kind of cleans the sides of the bowl, and then I'm going to be doing stretches and folds. So really, this is bringing everything together, and you do not need any special equipment. You can do this by hand. You do not need a Dutch oven. This will be a real loaf of bread. I'm using a loaf pan, okay? So I really do hope you give this a try, whether you like sourdough or not. This is not sour. This is just some of the sourdough techniques. So this is one of the recipes I did that sort of got me onto the sourdough train. So I will be mixing this up. I will do this off camera. I will show you what it looks like once it starts clearing the bowl, but the mixer is a little noisy, so I will not subject that to you. Actually, what I might do is I might just move the camera over and have it mix, but just mute it for you so you can see it coming together. Okay, this is looking a little extra wet than usual, so I'm going to add in a little extra flour. It isn't normally this wet, so I'm a little confused. But it's okay. Not a problem. Okay, that's about 1/4 cup. Let that go just a little longer and see if it comes together. Wow, that's still quite wet. It's not normally this wet, so it's another 1/4 cup. Okay, there we go. That's better. See? It's still a bit of a wet, sticky dough, but it is coming together. This is what I needed. Okay, so I'm going to move you over. My favorite bowl, or not. It's got a little bit of oil in it, but I just rubbed it all the way around. I don't want a whole bunch of oil in the bottom. I don't want it sitting in oil. I just don't want it to stick to the bowl. So let's get this out. Like I said, if you're doing this by hand, just mix it up to a shaggy dough and then just go right to the stretches and folds. This is a bit of a sticky dough to try to work on a counter. So just follow the instructions like you would for if you were making my pizza dough recipe. I'll link that above so you can just go back to it. But essentially you're going to mix it up in the bowl to a shaggy dough and then just leave it and go right into stretches and folds. Okay, grab the spatula and get this in the bowl. Needs a little encouragement. Okay. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to be doing stretches and folds. So every hour I'm going to do a stretch and fold, and I'm going to do that 5 times. That will help develop the gluten and smooth this up. It should also help tighten it up as well. And it's the same as the techniques I was using in previous videos. I can show that, but I will be wetting my hands beforehand, and I will bring you along for all of those so you can see how this changes from kind of a sticky, sloppy mess to something that comes together. If you don't have the time for that because you're setting this up in the morning and you're going to work all day, put in a little more flour and knead it, and then just let it sit all day. Okay? Because it's got a very small amount of yeast in it. Essentially what we did with the Poolish was we cultured yeast. Kind of like when you're in a lab and you're growing bacteria, you put a small amount in a culture and you grow more. That's what we're doing. We put a small amount of yeast in here and we're growing more. So it is going to take it a little bit of time to rise and do its thing. Adding that extra pinch will help speed things up a little, so it won't take quite so long, but it'll still take some time. So if you don't have the time to do this method, either this isn't really the recipe for you and you should do something a little faster, or knead this until it comes all together, which might require a little more flour, and then just let it sit. And you can just do a bulk rise in the fridge or all day on the counter this way. Okay, so I will bring you back for stretches and folds when I get to them. So the first one will be an hour from now. So I will see you in an hour. Okay, stretch and fold number 1. So make sure you have wet hands. I'm going to kind of work it loose, and then we're going to lift it, fold it over. This one's slightly different from the ones I was doing with the pizza one, so I'm showing you slightly different ways to do these. So you're going to pick it up and you're going to kind of let it stretch under its own weight. Okay, want to make sure you keep your hands wet. When you feel like the dough is fighting you a little, then you're done. So I'm going to just round it up a little. You can do this up against the side of the bowl just by pushing it under and turning it. And there we go. Stretch and fold number 1 is done. So you see how it looks a little bit better now? It's tighter skin. So I'll be doing that to the rest of them. I will bring you along for them, but I'll probably just zip through, probably with this as a voiceover. So that's 1 down, 4 to go. There's 2 of 5. Two down, 3 to go. Stretch and fold, 3 of 5. Okay, be back in an hour for 4 of 5. And finally, 5 of 5. Next time, it will be for shaping. Okay, it is time to shape the dough. I have what I'm assuming is a standard loaf pan. It says 23 centimeters by 13 centimeters by 7 centimeters. I don't know why it's, oh, here we go. Look at that, inches are on the other side. 9 and a quarter by 5 and a quarter by 2 3/4 inches. So there we go. I'm going to lightly flour the surface. I really don't want too much flour on here, but I don't want it to stick either. So I don't want too much flour because I do want the dough to stick to itself. I just don't want it to stick to the counter. So let's get this out. Should hopefully plop out. There we go. Get that out of the way. Okay, so of course it fell on the wrong side. Let's get this flipped over. Sticky. Try to not grab at your dough like that. If it's really sticky, it will like really stick to your hands. Okay, well, bottom's not going to be pretty anymore. So I want to sort of flatten it out into a bit of a rectangle, just sort of wide enough to fit my loaf pan. Then I'm going to roll it in on itself. I want to try to keep it somewhat tight. There we go. And then I'm going to tuck the ends under. Kind of like we're folding those stretches and folds again. So there we go. I'm going to flour up my hands, flour up the top. I want to try to tighten this up a little bit on the sides. So I'm just going to roll it against my fingers. Okay. And then I'm going to try to get this in. There we go. Okay. So this will need to rise probably to just above the top. Probably want a ½ inch to an inch above the top of the pan. So I will let that go, and then it will bulk ferment in the fridge overnight. Now you could bake it up at that point instead of sticking in the fridge overnight, but I like to stick it in the fridge overnight. It gives it a little extra time to develop a little more flavor. So it just really depends on what you're going for. And that is that for now. Here is the bread. It is the next day. It is out of the fridge, fresh. Did overproof a little bit, and I got a couple of dry spots because my fake plastic wrap thing didn't stick as well as it should, so I just pulled off the hard bits. It's okay. And yeah, it's a little overproofed, but it'll be fine. Bigger air pockets. Okay, now we're going to make the not very specialized equipment. If you do not have a Dutch oven, or you don't like to make bowls or any of that stuff, I will probably do this without the sound on, so you don't have to listen to the crinkling of the foil, but we're basically just going to make a foil cover for it, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I just fold it all up, and then I flip it over and put it on top. So this part will probably be muted because this will be super crinkly. Okay, there we go. A fake Dutch oven. It will go in the oven at 475 for 20 minutes. Then I will remove this and drop the temperature to 425 and go for another 10 to 20 minutes, basically until it's done at that point and you get the nice golden color that you want. I will show you how the finished loaf looks after it's done. A lovely non-sourdough sourdough bread. It's a little overproofed, but it will still taste good. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like. Please share so other people can also find this video. Are you subscribed yet? Why don't you hit that subscribe button so you'll know when my next videos come out. And I will see you next time on the Aerogarden Homestead.